Good evening, morons, and welcome to the second edition of Halloween Movies. This week we have a triple threat on there for you with three scary movies. We have The Strangers, Halloween, and The Descent that we have watched over the last 7 days, and we're going to be discussing with you guys tonight. Everyone is here apart from Sean. Of course, Sean doesn't like to go on the screen. He is the star of the show, the diva. We do forgive him when he does this. But 5 of us are here, even though 4 of us are on the screen. If you are watching on live on Twitch or on YouTube, you'll also see that Burnsy's froze for some reason as well. So he is there, but he's just froze with a little side profile on there, guys. He's appealing for a modelling deal, so he's got to do these type of things. But before we jump in to start talking about this week's movies, how is everyone doing? What did we think? Did you have a good Halloween?
All good.
Yeah, it was alright.
Amelia went guysing, and some woman gave her a tenner.
A tenner?
Believe it, a tenner. And her pal, a tenner each.
I hope you went back round for a second show with a different costume on.
I was going to say, I hope you got some of the money too.
I know. Well, I thought about taking a tax cut off it, but no, I'll let her keep
it. She's already been bumped clean out of that tenner, like, absolutely.
I'll take you back.
Well, listen, so, and I know that Sean's not being out guys in any way. He is a little bit tender for you that are listening. You'll hear it in his voice. He's had a rough, long weekend, haven't you, Sean?
It's been a very, very long weekend, aye.
Yeah. You can hear it. He sounds so deflated. It's the absolute last thing he's wanting to do, guys, on a Monday night is come in and talk to you about movies that he doesn't even like because he doesn't like scary films.
Correct.
Correct. So I'm going to assume we get minimal contribution, but we will prompt you as much as we can. Before we go in to talk about the movies for this week, like I said, we watched 2 scary movies last week. Those were Hocus Pocus and Hereditary. Was that right?
Well done.
Yes.
Nailed it.
Happy. I've been practicing. Still practicing. So Hereditary scored a 1.35, putting it number 70 on the leaderboard. And Hocus Pocus came in at a criminally low 2.4. Sits at 49 on the leaderboard. And I do believe Sean was a victim of some hate for that on our Instagram, wasn't he?
A little bit. I would say we actually got a lot more hate for Hereditary. A lot of people don't like that for some reason, and folk were fucking going mental in the comments. It was probably that's the most comments we've ever had under a post. Just people thinking, I don't get it. I don't know why people like it.
Well, that's it. I don't know if he's in the chat just now already or not, but Chris, from what we were watching tonight, I know he went and reviewed it on the back of us slating it, and gave it a different review, we shall say, from what we did. But anyway, we're here to talk about the 3 movies for this week, and I think The Strangers being the movie that got added in is a really, really good place for us to start. So The Strangers is a movie out in 2008. A young couple staying in an isolated vacation home are terrorised by 3 unknown assailants, starring Scott Speedman, and I always forget about Scott Speedman as well, so it's quite cool to see him, and Liv Tyler. Who would like to take us away first with this one?
Let's go Burnsy, since Burnsy's now like a new enthusiast for horror.
Well, this is interesting because Burnsy, horror seems to have been something that's stuck in with you since we've started doing this. We're coming up to a year on the line of doing Movie Club, and horror seems to be something you've always been quite positive about.
I'd say that's probably my favourites that we've done so far. It's kind of a bit of a mixture maybe with these ones, but on The Strangers, I think it was Daniel that said that he thought I would really enjoy this one. I don't know if he meant out of the 3 as well, but no, I thought this was a really good film. I thought some of it was a bit random, but that's probably what you're going to get with every kind of horror film. There was a really basic storyline, I would say, in terms of just being chased about. Obviously, maybe the mask, but in terms of people chasing you about in the house and it being a sort of being a chase throughout the film. I thought that James, the main character's husband, is that at the start I thought he came across a bit strange, and then at the very beginning, you know how when he goes away to get the cigarettes for his wife. I was kind of start. It's like he must have been blazing, and then he's driving about to get cigarettes. That was a bit strange, but anyway, just gloss over that bit. And then I was thinking at the start that he was maybe going to be in on the bit of how the person came to the door. I got that vibe for him that maybe he was going to be involved in it some way. Obviously, that didn't lead to anything. It turns out he's just as oblivious to what his wife was. I thought Liv Tyler was really good throughout the film. I think the bit that I missed most was probably when she was in the house herself. They built the tension really well, I thought. They used like loads of different camera angles, I thought, in terms of just to try and... I don't know if it was maybe to just show you how like there was not... You couldn't obviously see anything in terms of any of the masked people being there, but I thought that was really well done. I think that's maybe the first time I probably noticed that in a film. It was probably... I didn't think it was ridiculously scary, but it did scare me at some stages. I think when you saw like the first sighting of the masked man, that I did shit myself at that bit. And how his friend just sort of showed up, although it was a really minimal thing. You knew it was coming, but I think it added to it in terms of them two like just being that scared that they were just going to shoot in, and he was going to shoot in and move to try and protect him and his wife. The chase was really well done as well throughout it. I thought it was quite interesting. It was edge of your seat stuff. And the ending with Kirsten, obviously the two boys came into the house, and when it ends with her scream, you're obviously assuming that she's dead as well. And it was a bit of a twist instead of just everyone dying and then the three people just going away from the house. But no, overall, I thought it was a really good movie. It was the other thing I thought was a bit bizarre, as I've taken note of it, is that when he gets turned down his marriage proposal gets turned down. For one, I was thinking it was a bit of a strange place to ask somebody to marry at somebody else's wedding, which I thought it's a bit random again. As you said aye, and then you just go back and it's like, oh, we're going to get married too. I think you would be like, what the fuck are you doing? But then he goes, when he's sitting in the living area and just opens up a tub of ice cream. He was just going to sit there and just demolish a 1 litre tub of ice cream just himself while his wife's going to get a bath.
I'm laughing at that, Bunzy, because when that happened, I seen that and I thought, ice cream's never that smooth when you whip it straight out the freezer.
Well, you have to wait for it to defrost a wee bit at least. But I thought it was good in terms. It wasn't just all constant scariness. There was like some scenes that were a bit not light-hearted for them, but it was light-hearted for you to watch. So no, I thought it was really good. I'll see what Sean thinks about it next.
Sean, this seems right in there as something that you would have loved anyway with this type of movie.
I've seen bits of it before. I never actually watched it the full way through.
Sure.
I used to be like quite kind of scared there, and that's why I didn't really follow it through. But obviously, I followed it through this time. I actually thought it was all right. It's more kind of creepy for me, like with the knocks and stuff like that, because like that's my worst nightmare. Is like somebody chatting at the door, like just constantly, and you're not knowing who's there. Obviously, I don't get scared when folk chat at my door, but people are just terrorising you, and it's just something so simple as just a knock at the door. Just is very, very creepy. I thought it was well done. Again, with any kind of typical horror films, the decision making for the characters, it's just fucking so frustrating at times. Like again, in any normal situation, they've obviously got a gun, so there's absolutely no reason why they should be getting like killed off. They should be able to put an end to it there and then, basically just shoot the bad guys. You know, I know it's a horrible time with all this how it's planned out, but it wasn't scary. I was anticipating. It is quite kind of creepy. I like the whole kind of wide shots where the masked guys are standing in the background. I also liked as well how when they took the masks off at the end, that you didn't get to see like a full glimpse of their face. Because I think that would have kind of taken away the kind of so that it's better that you don't get to see their face for me, because it would make it less creepy and less scary. I know you got a glimpse of the lassie, but with the guy, you never really seen his full face at all. But no, I did actually quite enjoy it. And probably should have obviously watched it all the way through before, because it's a film that Laurie does like as well. I'll probably watch the second. I'll just, I don't know, just I think Laurie wants to watch it. She's never seen it before, so I'll probably watch the second one with her at some point over the next couple of weeks as well.
It's interesting you're saying about the decision making and the gun and stuff, because I thought they played that bit really well, because he had no idea what he was meant to do with the gun, and he fumbled about with it and he couldn't quite get it working, and they stretched it out to show that he was a bit clueless on it. I thought that was quite well done, because that would probably be the situation for us. Like, you'd be in there not knowing what to do with this, shiting yourself, never shot a gun before in your life, and he's obviously then panicked and he shot the first thing that's went by. Although in my head I'm thinking at that time, why is the pal no shouting, like, James, I'm here.
Aye.
Where are
I think he
you?
did at the start though, didn't he?
From the outside and stuff he did, didn't he? And then
Yeah, I tried phoning him, then shouted as he walked in the door, but then never really did. Once it wasn't even like he was making himself known in the house. It was like he was tiptoeing around as well, which was I thought quite weird.
I guess maybe as well though, is if you were in that position though and you don't hear anything back, you maybe would be shitting yourself and you don't want. Maybe he actually thought somebody was in the house, and that's why he wasn't doing it. Like, he was thinking maybe there has been something that's went on. It's not just that guy. And I agree with you, but maybe, I'm just trying to think. I'm just playing devil's advocate, really.
Oh, you wouldn't mind when he pulls up, his window gets panned in his car. He pulls up as well. So I think he was scared, and that's what they're trying to play off there, is that he's creeping about and he's worried that something's happened.
aye.
That was.
I would have wheel spin my fucking car clean out there and left using that house yourselves. Sees later. I'm not getting involved. That's kind of pal I am. For me, this is one of the kind of like ultimate scary films though. Like, you're in the middle of nowhere. You're just in this house that you're not even that familiar with, and a randomer's at your door chapping it. Like, if somebody was to chap my door at 4 a.m, would I fuck be answering it for the first case? Like, it just wouldn't happen. And then it obviously continuously comes back, and then that's the type of stuff that freaks me out. The fact that they're stuck in this house, although they've got the house and you should feel safe and comfortable, but actually they're at their weakest because these people are surrounding them and playing and toying with them. And it is a big cat and mouse thing the whole time, and it's just a game for them. And there's no explanation other than the fact that they answered the door. And for me, again, that's scary about how random it is. It wasn't premeditated that they were going after that specific house. They were just killing somebody that night. And that was what was happening. To me, that's the bit that freaks me out, because when you see these horrible, like, murders and attacks and stuff that happen in the news, and it's all just randomly happened in a street, and you just happen to be that person that's walked by that's been the victim of it, and this is the situation of that. And I knew this was inspired by a true event, so it's not based on a true story, it is inspired, which I knew from the start, which obviously added a little bit more to it, because some form of this reality has actually happened, and Hunter may go on to this in the trivia a little bit later, but this is someone's reality has had bits of this, and to me that's a lot scarier than like a slasher movie or like a paranormal movie, because this is a plausible thing that can happen to you. But I like Scott Speedman as well, so I was quite happy to see him in a film. I feel like you never see him, but you know who he is. Liv Tyler is always one that I've never really liked in any film, so she was decent in it. Not my favourite. I know you liked her, Burnsy, but she's I'm not keen on her. She talks really quiet, and like I feel like she blows her words out. So she's like, James, come here. And I'm like, just fucking say your sentence, you idiot. It just irritates me. But this, I was scared through this. This is, if we're reviewing this on feelings throughout it, and I think storylines with horror films are always really difficult to analyse, but out of the movies that we watched this week, this scared me the most.
Yeah.
Is probably how I'll go when I come to reviewing it. This scared me more than the other ones. Daniel?
I was going to say, I'll jump in. I like this a lot. I've seen this, I saw it at the cinema at the time. This was a great experience at the cinema. I do think that a lot of these horror films we watch, this is why we should start going to the cinema more before we review some films, because it's a totally different experience sometimes for these type of movies, especially. But no, I think it's good. Like you've mentioned before, the scenes where it looks like there's nothing happening, but then it takes you a little while to focus, and then you see something in the background. Like that's, again, the cinema experience with that is lots of different people notice it at different times. So you'll get like a little gasp somewhere, then it spreads about throughout everybody because everyone sees it at different moments. It's good. I just think it's really well done. There's not really a lot of movies like this. I think other movies have tried to build up a similar sort of tension, but you never really see it done well. What's a good example of a bad one? Like Panic Room. You ever seen Panic Room?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's so lame compared to that. I mean, it's a very similar sort of idea. I mean, you're trapped inside, someone's coming to try to get in. But no, excellent.
Minimal dialogue in this, which is, I think, adds to it, because it adds and builds that tension. And Panic Room being an example, there's far too much dialogue and story going on in there. Like, keep it simple. These people are coming to kill you. They're not really giving you a choice. There's a fucked you up in every corner. We don't know who they are or why they're there. And that's it.
That's it. And the thing is, a lot of horror movies, or just movies in general, try to make it a bit cheesy by having the character talk to themselves and like give themselves little pep talks and all that. This is a lot more realistic. It feels like something, like you said, that could happen. Obviously, I'm assuming the elements of this that are true are very, very loose, but we'll leave that behind. I like seeing Dennis from Always Sunny come in and get shot by his pal. That was good.
There's definitely not enough Glenn Howerton in this film for me.
I know, a little bit more of him would be better for me. But I think all the jump scares are very, very good. I think the use of music with the wee record player is brilliant. Just adds an extra wee layer of tension. But yeah, it's solid, I would say. Scares you, does its job. It's good.
Go on, Hunter, what are you thinking?
Yeah, and your trivia.
Right, so firstly, I know you kind of touched on it, Kyle, about it being based on the two events, but the true event that it's actually based on happened to the director when he was a child, where they had someone come to the house randomly, as happens in the film here, knock on the door, ask for someone by a name who didn't stay there, and then they left off into the night. But what happened that night was in the same neighbourhood where the director stayed, there was a house he's getting broken into that very same evening. So I don't know if it's a weird coincidence or that's what they were doing, they were just shutting the door or whatever, but that's what it is. Now, I know it kind of sort of alluded to something again at the start of this, where the whole this was like making it like it was almost like an FBI kind of crime file that was being investigated. But I think I did read something else as well, that was then again also based on a set of murders from the 1971, I think it was, or 81, that were left unsolved. So it's kind of, I think it's kind of took the two ideas and obviously sort of over-dramatised them for cinematic effect. What I do notice as well, which I did think quite weird, because you never really see movies made this way, it was actually shot in chronological order.
Nice.
You know, usually they will kind of, if they're on location, they'll film what needs to get filmed here, and then they move somewhere else and then film. But that's because they built the house on stage, or the inside of the house, so they were able to shoot it kind of all in chronological order.
I like that.
But for the film as itself, for me, I did feel a bit kind of let down with it. You know, I know I've kind of touched on this before, but I don't really scare that much as well. I would have probably found, if this was based on something real, like everything that happened did start to finish, and it was I find knowing the true facts probably a bit more scary than kind of having them played out. No, I think knowing that it's fiction kind of takes a bit away from me. I would like, I've said it before, I would like to experience something like this in the cinema. I think I'll maybe enjoy it a lot more. As I said, we're kind of going to touch on this with one of the other films, but when you see the characters, you see that standing there, I think because it's already been done, I think, too many times. Obviously, one of the films we're going to touch on is probably the benchmark for it. But I just I wasn't really grasped in, I wasn't really taken into the film at all. I wasn't on the edge of my seat, didn't find my heart racing at all. I just kind of was waiting for something big to happen, and I know for others that something did, but I just wasn't really grabbed into it by it at all.
It's weird. It's interesting that because I think I'm the opposite to you, Hunter. Like I was constantly like not sweating, but like hiding behind my hands a little bit to what was coming, because I'm like, that to me is like that the ultimate scary part is somebody being in the distance watching you, knowing more about what's going to happen than you, and then the longer that drags out for me, the more tension it builds. And you mentioned a film we're going to talk about shortly that does do that perfectly. Much scarier than having someone jump out of a cave, which we'll touch on in a wee minute anyway.
Mm-hmm.
For me as well, I was just going to add when you said that, Kels, I think it depends on... See, I watched this film first, and I think because I watched them all in a fairly short period of time, then when it came to watching the last of the three, as I kind of thought, like, I didn't find that as scary, but maybe it's because I've just watched, like, 2 horror films, like, before it, or supposed horror films, so then it doesn't have the same effect because you're sort of anticipating more things that are going to happen, whereas if you watched a horror film just 1 month after you watched the previous one, I think you'd maybe find it a bit... That may just be me, but that's how I find it. I find this one more scary, but this was probably the first one. This was the first one I watched out of the 3 too.
Well, Sean, the expert in horror, so what's his thoughts on that?
Now, what's your scare score?
My scare score is... To be fair, I've already seen it, like, probably the first 5 minutes or so before. Like, I kind of knew, like, what direction it was going in and stuff like that. So I would probably give it a 5 out of 10 on my scare score. However, watching it for the first time, it would be completely different.
Do you know what, I think, just thinking about Burnsy's thoughts, there wasn't a baby and there wasn't a third person into the love triangle, so it's probably ruined it a bit for Burnsy.
I was going to mention this when we go on to our next film. I'm assuming that's the one we're going to do next anyway. Burnsy's got the full love triangle and fucking all that shit there. I'm excited for that.
Well, I think we've covered really the Strangers. I would give it. I'd watch it. It does give you the fear, builds anticipation a lot. It's intense, man. It is intense. I was lights off, really loud, get this on, try to have that cinematic experience with this, and I shat myself the way through it. And I've got like quite a lot of windows down the stairs where I'm caught. It was like the way that my telly's set up, it glares into a side window that bit kind of reflects off in my shed and looks at the back window. And every time something flashed, I shat myself because I could see it out of my peripherals. I'm like, fuck, what was that? If somebody had come and chapped my door at midnight that night, I would have been fucking beelined out the back door and halfway down the street.
If you actually lived closer to us, then we could have probably done that, considering what you were mentioning at the time, saying how worried you were in that.
You know what? When we were talking there, I was thinking, I'm going to go to Sean's house randomly at like 3 in the morning when they just chap his door.
I'm only 2 minutes away. I can actually do that.
Well, maybe that's what you should do. Just randomly, Daniel, just give us a wee door a chap.
You need to get in the buzzard access thing first, so it's going to be less a surprise when I buzz you in, Daniel.
Somebody will let me in, don't worry.
Oh, jeez. Right, well, let's get on and get giving it some scores, guys. What about Insta to start with?
So that obviously this one didn't win the vote, and it's been in a few times and never won a vote, and so it was the least popular when it came to the scores. Not very many people scored it, but I got an average of a 3 overall, so pretty just above average.
An average of a 3 then. Burnsy, what was your thoughts on the score?
I'm going to give it a 4. I think it was just the only reason why it didn't score. I did really like it, but it just didn't scare me enough. That's the reason why it's not any higher. But I thought it was really, really well done.
Happy days. Sean?
I'm just going to give it a 3 out of 5.
3 out of 5. Hunter?
Far from the worst film we've ever watched, but again, still far from the best. So a 2 out of 5 for me.
2 out of 5. Daniel?
I like this 3.5 overall for me.
3.5. And I'm going to score it the highest out of everybody and give it a 4.25. Which obviously is high when you think of the other movies that we've scored, but just based on what the movie done for me during that experience, ticked all the boxes. I didn't really have much faults for it. Get Liv Tyler out and puts anybody else in, it'd be a little bit higher. Burnsy, what would that give it overall?
Overall, that's a 3.35.
A 3.35 then coming in for The Strangers, which higher. I thought horror films didn't typically go that high. It puts it joint 29th with Battle Royale.
Is that the highest horror movie, or is Nightmare on Elm Street still above it?
Nightmare on Elm Street still sitting a little bit higher at 3.7, which is 22nd on our list. So, yeah, I think that's a very respectable score for The Strangers. So, next movie I want to jump into, I don't want to go into Halloween yet, because I think we've started off a good movie. Let's get the shite out of the way, and then let's get into the Halloween after. So let's go into The Descent. Like I slid that in there, a little thoughts on it. The Descent is a caving expedition goes horribly wrong as the explorers become trapped and ultimately pursued by a strange breed of predators. It's got a 7.2 on IMDb out in 2005. Daniel, you come in and give us your thoughts on this British horror movie.
I was kind of going to go last because I think you're going to be surprised, but I think this is excellent. Like this, I really like this. I've got a funny feeling now from what you are saying that I'm going to be the only one. I thought you would all like this as well, but no, I think this is. I just don't know. There's something about this that I've just always liked. Again, I saw this at the cinema the first time. I think it's scary enough without the monsters anyway. Just like being stuck in the holes and like the way they build the claustrophobia, and even before you know there's anything that can get them down there, there's still like plenty of jump scares, and even just the car accident at the start gets you fucking jumping out your seat. I think this does a lot for. So we constantly shit on things like Ghostbusters, the female reboot, and like when they take a thing that was traditionally done by a man and just replace them all with women, as like the Ocean's movies, with women, stuff like that. This is a great example of why you should just give women an original and let them be in it. So it's there's no males, no predominant males in this cast at all, and the women are all fucking badasses. I know some of their personalities are quite annoying and all that, right? But they're all fucking badasses. Like, see when they're hanging for the top when they've got to go out and the women's got to put the rope through to get across, and she's like hanging on and screaming. And they show that scene for like a good 3 or 4 minutes. It's fucking awesome. Like, you feel like she's going to fall at any moment. I know that a lot of you are going to shit on the monsters, but I think it's a cool concept to something that's evolved. See, when you watch like a David Attenborough documentary about like lizards that have evolved in a cave, that's what they look like. And I think if a human had evolved to just live underground in a cave, it would totally look something similar that I've evolved in a similar way. But yeah, I don't know why it is. There's something about this. I understand maybe why you are going to shit on it a wee bit, but it's awesome. I think it builds up tension well. I think it's creepy. I think it's claustrophobic. I think it's got enough twists in it to keep you interested, and it's a good, solid representation of women. There you go. Just shit in it.
I'll go and sprinkle shit throughout this so and let everybody come in at different points. So for me, this is like a good movie for an hour, and then the monsters come in. And being claustrophobic and stuff is something that scares 11 daylights out of me. Like, that's fucking terrifying. And this builds up a lot of that tension. Chris has just put in the chat there saying, definitely my favourite of the 3 for this week, The Descent. Oh dear God. Chris, you need to review The Descent then, because it's going to be different from what I'm going to say here. So, if I take this section by section, right, I thought that the women were all shite in terms of their acting ability. I thought the dialogue and the conversations were so poor that I was so distracted with how shit I felt they were in the acting side of it that it annoyed me. I'm like, right, let's just get to the scary parts now, because you guys, I need you to stop talking, like stop communicating with each other, because this is frustrating. I did shit myself at the car accident. That was freaky as anything. I was watching the film originally with Caden and Sarah at the time, and that happened. They both literally just got up and went to bed and left me. They were like, I'm not watching this if it's going to be like something like this all the way through. The going through the caves and all that kind of stuff had me sitting behind my pillow, because it was making me really, really anxious, and I could feel my heart racing and stuff through this, because it terrifies me that. And then I'll start talking about the monsters and stuff a little bit later on, but I'm going to let someone else come in just now.
I'll jump in because I am going to resurrect the Dunham Alliance. I fucking enjoyed this film a lot.
Yes, come on!
Now, kind of similar to what Daniel has said, literally, first of all, it hits you right in the fucking face with, literally, no pun intended, with that car crash. And then, obviously, the tension, obviously, so you know this woman has lost her husband and her child, and in the background, one of her supposed best pals has obviously been getting plucked off the husband too. So this tension between the characters starts building through there. And then it's like everyone else is in on the secret, but it's like she doesn't know, like no one's told her, or she has told her, and she's just keeping quiet about it. She's keeping face. She's going to get a revenge one way or another. Obviously, she doesn't envisage maybe how this trip is going to play out the way it did. But then as you go in, and you've got Juno, she's obviously feeding off the egos, doing the whole giving it like, oh, she wasn't the only one that lost stuff in that car. She's making everything all about her. She needs to be the macho. She's the lead. She's taking them on this trip. And then, as you said, once they go down and they're in and they're lost, and then it all starts building up for there. So again, you feel trapped. You feel like you're almost within the caves with them at that time. You can't breathe, struggling for breathing. My heart was racing going through this bit, and then. With it builds up to the monsters, I mean, they weren't the scariest, but at times when you just sort of see them and they just randomly appeared, you kind of got a jump. I mean, once you start getting the close-ups of their faces and whatever, they're not the most scariest of things. But it's quite interesting. With some of the trivia I did read, it was kind of based on like how would a human evolve essentially if they were trapped in a cave, and essentially that's it. There's kind of almost bat-like tendencies of almost the blind with essentially using high-pitched hearing to see where they're going. So obviously there was all the bats at the start of the film as well. So it kind of I lead off into that. And what I did as well, so Shauna, who plays Sarah, actually was very claustrophobic, so she didn't find that her acting during some of these scenes hard at all because she's naturally claustrophobic.
Genuinely shaking herself.
The neon light sticks, which they were using as glow torches, were actually purchased from an adult toy shop. I wondered what they looked like in a close-up.
Oh, for fuck's
Glow in the
sake.
dark dildo.
Big glow in the dark dildos. Fucking hell.
This just took a better turn.
That's the name for the podcast this week, Kyle. Big glow.
Glow in the dark dildo.
I'm going to write that down there now.
And an interesting tidbit was all 6 main characters are all born in 6 different countries.
Wow.
There you go. A little light-hearted bit of fun there. I'm shocked that so far there's been 2 out of the 3 of us that has been all over. I think this is great because I just felt like it dragged on, and I was not after like the monsters came out, and then it's the camera work was like gave me a sore head trying to keep up with it because it was jumping all over the place and I was so confused and I couldn't quite keep up with what was happening, who was who. I was because I wasn't invested in any of the actresses that were playing the characters. I was like, what one was that again? Am I supposed to like her? Was she the twat?
I was probably just because you weren't invested in it. I think it wasn't difficult to follow. I don't think from that point of view, but I can see why if you weren't enjoying it, you'd probably just be like, because it was jumping for the different groups all over the place, but. I guess that was needed though, because otherwise, if it's their own, you couldn't just go like show you their full journey, then jump back to the other group's full journey, because that would just be stupid as well.
I mean, more in sense of the camera work. The camera work was like shaky, bouncing, spinning. I'm like, no, let me see what's going on. Let me get scared. Let me get invested, or let me understand a little bit better. And maybe it was just a bit too fast paced for me in that sense. Then.
I want to hear Barnsley's thoughts.
I think I'm kind of in the middle. There's bits of all 3 that I've said so far that I agree with. I think like I've never been in a position of being in their kind of position of getting claustrophobic or that, but it would scare me. I know if that did happen to you. One of the first bits I found scary was when the ravens just like jumped out of the cave at the very start. I jumped at my seat at that point. I think it wasn't something that was meant to scare you, but just because it came out of nowhere and you weren't expecting it. But like the I just find it more gruesome than scary a lot of the time. Like, the leg break was gruesome, but then similar to sort of Kelly, the first half of it, before the monsters came in, I enjoyed that bit. And then when the monsters first came in at the very start, like, the first sight of them was quite scary. But then once they were involved over and over again, it just kind of, it made you sort of not feel as scared, because you know what they could do. You kind of knew what was going to happen. You'd sort of seen them eating, like, people, like, going into their throat and killing them. So I think once that's happened once, it doesn't have the same effect on you when it happens with various other people. I don't think the acting was, like, overly impressive, but I think it was overly awful either. But you didn't really feel that invested in any of the characters. I thought the only one that I felt invested in was Sarah, and I thought the one that played Juno, she was really good in it. It was when Beth gets killed by her best friend, I thought that was quite a good moment to add in, because it was like she was putting out her misery, and you sort of could see the emotion between the both of them. But as I say, is that once the Cross came into it, and I don't know if it would have been better if it was further towards the end. It might have made me enjoy it a bit more, instead of being sort of bang in the middle to end was all about them chasing them and trying to kill them. The other thing that I think you mentioned it on the stream last week, Daniel, about how there was two different endings for the UK and the US ones. I don't know if you mentioned the stream to us separately, but I thought the UK ending was definitely better than the American one, because the American one was basically Sarah gets out and she lives happily ever after. That was just stupid. Whereas the fact it was all... Sorry, go on.
Yeah, the bit where it ends up all being a dream before she wakes up.
Yeah.
That's the American one. It just ends there. That's it.
Yeah.
I did think that was quite a clever ending, though. That goes back and then she's like, if I was to take some plus points for it, I enjoyed that part of it. Obviously, I did know about the multiple endings, so I could work out when it would have been cut and put on. And the scene where she swings her little pickaxe around and accidentally sticks it through her pal's neck was an absolute belter.
There's loads of great stuff in that.
I wasn't even sure if that was actually... Was it really unintentional? I don't know.
Oh, I took it fully as accidental. Like, she's in a panic, in a mad flurry, in a rage, swings round and just sticks it clean through her neck. And I was...
It's kind of similar to that scene in The Strangers where the guy just shoots his best pal in the head. That's it. When you're in that situation, any sudden movement of that behind you, you're just going to react to it because you don't know who or what it'll be.
I think it was the way it was set out was as if it was a complete accident. It was only because obviously what you see after it, and you want me to talk about this, so I will, where she ends up admitting to her pal that she's obviously been having an affair. Because of that bit, made you think, is she just doing that because she knows and does they want the secret coming out or something like that? But it was decent, but I think it was just middle of the road for me, really. It could have been a lot better than what it was. So I think similar to Hunter, when he was talking about The Strangers, I just sort of felt a bit let down when it got to the end, because it could have been a lot better film and a lot maybe scarier if they'd done it better, and maybe there was more put towards them. Obviously, they were constantly trying to get out of the cave, but instead of having the monsters there for half the film, it could have maybe had more of them trying to get out, instead of just avoiding the monsters for half the film and trying to get out. It just seemed a bit awful for me with that bit.
I do agree, actually. Like, that's where the one negative of this for me is I think there should have been an extra half hour before you saw any of the monsters. I agree in that aspect of it. That's why it's not going to get maybe as high a score as you might think from a description.
That's good. It sounds as if I've up Kel's score and downgraded yours, so I'm happy with my...
You're an influencer. Sean, what was your thoughts? This must have been right up your street.
I liked it.
What?
I've got it on DVD now.
Right, I'm ending the stream now.
It's been years and years and years since I've seen it, which was, and there wasn't really much that I could remember of it, but no, I thought it was quite good. Again, just kind of, it's already been said, half the stuff anyway, but the idea of being stuck in a cave is terrifying, moving out and stuff like that. I think that like a lot of it is like shot in darkness, and like kind of obviously because they are stuck in a cave, so that I like that that you couldn't really tell what was going on in all of the scenes because it was so dark, and the way that the camera was shooting it and stuff. I think that added to like the panic of being stuck in a cave. The monster thing, they were more kind of creepy looking things. Like I wasn't really scared about it. There was a few jump bits as you've already kind of touched on, but I actually quite liked it. And the ending I thought was really good. I went and googled the other endings. I knew that Daniel had mentioned it before. I don't understand why the Americans felt the need to change it. I don't think I was expecting it to be an absolute brutal ending that would have been like really harsh to show and things like that. But she just wakes up and she's just been hallucinating that she'd escaped. So I don't really understand why they changed that.
I'm sure like there's a thing with American audiences that they get very low satisfaction scores when there's not like a happy ending. Like even in a horror film, they expect like the good guys to get away, sort of thing.
Oh, for
And I know, man, because there's a sequel, and the sequel carries on exactly where the American ending finishes. So like, I watched
you said when you didn't understand what was going on.
yeah, I didn't have a fucking clue. So I watched it and then I thought, oh, it's going to start off with another dream sequence. This is quite cool. And then it just kept going and going and going. And then it turns out in the American sequel, she's got amnesia and they make her go back down into the cave again to like jog her memory. It's fucking stupid. And then there's a creepy old guy that's been feeding the things in the cave for years. It's fucking shite.
That sounds awful. I just think, like, if you want to change, like, for me to enjoy this a little bit more, it would have been a little bit longer spent on the claustrophobic side of them being lost. Maybe having one, potentially two of the monsters that not even brutal. Like I don't want the brutal killer at that point. Just take them. Like the monster comes and takes one away, and then they find they're dead as they go through the cave. To me, that would have been a little bit more scary and built up the monsters to be a more frightening bit at the end. But then have them all be killed by it would have been better. Once it started like tearing out their necks and their stomachs and all that kind of stuff, I was a bit like, oh, all right, this isn't that scary.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite gory, like really that. I'm not a big fan of like gory films, and this was quite gory. That's probably the only kind of downside for me. That's just a personal thing for me. Other people won't really mind about that, but I don't really understand the issue. Obviously, you've mentioned it there, Kyle, about the monsters. It's part of the film. Do you know what I mean? I know it's kind of like in two halves with the claustrophobic stuff and then it's monsters, but they're there for a reason.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just think from my experience of it, though, what I'm saying is that I had that tension build throughout me and the fear kicking in throughout me until the monsters came into it. Then it went away. Then it was like, oh, right, I feel a bit easier now watching this. If they had continued more, like, have one of them get stuck, die at that point would have been a more fearful experience than watching it get their neck ripped apart. Oh, Daniel's been introduced by a little cat there. Speaking of evil little creatures, a cat's popped up on the screen. How ironic is that, eh?
He knows you've been talking.
I'm sure Daniel said last week he was going to bring one of the cats on the stream actually next week.
Aye, man, he just came on himself. Now I've just got a big tail in front of me.
Hunter, do you have any more trivia that you've seen there?
It was kind of weird because when I was watching this film, I was thinking I'd scored 28 Days Later too high because I think this film caught me in the way that I maybe think that 28 Days Later maybe first did the first time I watched it. And Googling my trivia, I found out that the young fella actually played a young zombie in 28 Days Later.
Oh, nice.
Right.
Yeah. Sadly, no more adult toy shop based trivia, I'm afraid.
So, just PM me the shop details over. We'll have a look. But we've got glow in the dark dildos is better than Sean being scared when his door gets chapped.
It's a chat for sponsorship. Surely there's a glow in the dark company that will sponsor us.
Well, listen, Daniel, you can give it a personal experience on how you got on with them. What did Instagram have to say about this one then, Daniel?
This one again got quite mixed scores. The cat's on top of my notes, so I can't see. But yeah, this got a 3.25 average overall on Instagram. Some people really enjoyed it. Some people very much disliked it. So much like us.
I'm going to presume one of them was Chris giving it a 5 based on what he said in the chat.
Not quite a 5, but he did give it a good score.
No, shocking. Right, Daniel, you started us off. You to give us away with your first score then, please.
Yeah, I've got a soft spot for this. I very much enjoy it. I think it's good for a low-budget British movie. I give it a 4.
A 4? Well, I'm going to cut that in half and give it a 2. Hunter?
3.75 for me.
3.75. Sean?
3.25 for me.
3.25. Burnsy?
I'm going to give it a 2.5. I sort of touched on it. It was just average.
2.5. See, I bet you thought I was going to get a lot lower than that.
I thought Dad was going to give it a lot lower as well when he said the score surprisingly comes out with a 4 rating off.
Maybe thought everybody was going to hate it.
Aye. Overall, that's a 3.1 for this one.
A 3.1, so below The Strangers. This comes in joint 34th with Con Air. Con Air.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite happy that people enjoyed this because this is one that I've campaigned for quite a while.
There you go. Maybe it's something I'll watch again in the future, but not for me. Not for me. Okay, on to the finale of this week. The daddy of Halloween movies, called Halloween. So, I'll read out the blurb on here. I'm sure everybody knows what this film is about. It came out in 1978. It's 15 years after murdering his sister on Halloween night in 1963. Michael Myers escapes from a mental hospital and returns to the small town of Haddonfield, Illinois to kill again. Hunter, I'm going to come to you first.
Right, do you know this is, I think this is the first time I've actually watched this one. I think I've watched the many of the sequels and remakes and whatever.
Just constantly watching H2O.
I think so. I think that was probably the first one I remember watching. But I enjoyed it for what it is. I mean, you kind of got to be a bit realistic. You know, we're going back and reviewing a film that's over 40 years old, essentially. Like, so with regards to effects and stuff like that, you've kind of got to take a lot of stuff with a pinch of salt. But I just find I like the fact that it gives you a bit of origin into Mike Myers himself, but I think obviously because I've watched so many of the later films over the years that none of that's, unless it has been touched on and I just can't remember, but it was nice to actually have that, even though you realise that his background is he's just a little creepy murdering bastard, essentially.
You just want to pump his sister.
Oh, pretty much. But one of the tidbits of trivia that I did find was they wanted to make a character that no one found relatable, and you've got to be the absolute dregs of society if you've got to find anything relatable in his character at all.
Fuck, aye. No, you definitely will be.
But I just find, I know we kind of touched on it with The Strangers about how you just like with the tension or the scaredness you would feel with just seeing appearing, but I think Halloween, I think, set the benchmark for that. With just having like looking at the window and there's just like Mike Myers across the street or just driving past the car. You don't really get to see him. He's just there, and then you look away, you turn around, and he's away again. And even for somebody who can appear somewhere and then disappear so very quickly, one thing I did find fascinating when reading the trivia is not only does he never speak in the movie, he also never runs. You only ever kind of see him walking or he's just there.
Yeah.
I did find that very, very kind of... As I said, this is, I think, what every horror film has been working towards since. It's a gold standard, I think, in just creating the tension and the build-up and the character throughout the film. You just keep it in. Not having him there constantly definitely adds to it a lot.
I wonder how much screen time he actually has on screen. I don't know if you've got that, Hunter, because he's very, very minimal that you see him and then it pops up and you shite yourself, but you know that scare's coming. And which I think is like the magic of this, that you know fine well that the music's going to get a little bit more tense.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to get slightly louder, and bam, you're going to see him on the screen, but you still shite yourself anyway. And I touched on about The Strangers, about that whole concept of that being really scary to me, and this is based on, again, this type of movie, growing up watching that, having that one guy just preying on you, again, no reasons why, you're not understanding anything, there's no voice, no talks, and you know it's coming as well, which for me, like, I was still literally jumping at points of this. It's been that long since I've seen it. So when he flew to the door and knifed that boy into the wall, on into the cupboard or whatever, shat my pants. He comes flying out of that door, absolutely crapped it, because he doesn't move with any type of speed, and then he flies out the door. But you knew it was coming, and it still made it scary. And it's interesting watching it as well, because I kind of remember Jamie Lee Curtis for any other movies than the later versions of this.
I'm the same.
So when you see her as well, she's that type of character that she could look 18, but she could also look 40 at the point where she's in this film.
She definitely looks 40. She doesn't.
Aye. She just looks 40 for 40 years. That's it. She never looked 18 or 40. Just a constant 40.
Full headed grey hair. We're expected to believe she's babysitting and all this. Fucking.
I wonder how old she was when it came out. Actually, she was 20.
No,
She
I
was-
think that when they started shooting, when they started shooting, she was the only teenager in the cast, apart from the
So she, the youngest out of that lot, and we're slagging her off for her grace. Bonzi, what was your thoughts on this? Was this the first time you had seen it?
Yeah, I think this is the first time I'd seen it. When I mentioned earlier how this was the last one that I watched, I only watched this one today, and I think I sort of struggled with this one a wee bit, just because, I think partly because it was the last of the three that I'd watched. I think if I'd watched this one first, I would have maybe been a bit more scared of it. Because The Strangers is sort of kind of a wee bit based on it in terms of the, obviously, like, appearing in the background to start with. So once I'd watched that and you sort of had an idea of how it's going to, the same kind of ideas is going to be throughout this. So I think it lost its sort of scariness for me a wee bit because of that. Whereas I think if I'd watched them all around, it would have worked the opposite way. I thought it was quite fast paced throughout it. I think it seemed as if as well that I was about 45 minutes in, and all you'd sort of seen so far was how Michael was like a creep and following people around. So to me, it could have been better if there was maybe that was a bit shorter, and the ending seemed a bit rushed. Whereas that can all happen in the space of 20 minutes when he goes to the house and starts killing the husband and the wife, and then goes across the road. That seemed as if that was, to me, was too rushed. I thought in terms of, because it's that old though, the film, it does hold up in terms of time. There was obviously various points where you are scared, like you said, Kel, when it comes at the kitchen, just knifes the guy there. What else did I think? I'm just
to jump in there, the only non-scary but fucking hilarious bit is when he comes through with the sheet air he's heat.
that was a bit on it.
I forgot all about
And I think similar to how I think it was Sean that touched on about The Strangers, how it was like when they're knocking on the door, similar to there, how they were the doors were just opening and creaking, and that was something so simple again. And you can imagine if you were in the position of any of the characters in there, like if one of my doors just like gently opened and then started squeaking, then because I've just watched this, I would shit myself and that's all because of that film. So I like how like something so simple just can be so scary. It was quite a simple plot because it was just a creep just going about and wanting to kill people, but I think that worked quite well. Whereas probably similar to a lot of horror films, there doesn't need to be a plot, it just needs to be something that's simple, scares you. And as I touched before, I think it was more just that it seemed as if either they needed to either extend the film to maybe like an extra half hour, or cut down the say first 45 minutes into 30 minutes and extend the ending a wee bit too. So I guess similar to the previous film that we just reviewed, it was It was decent, but again, it was kind of something. I think because as well that it's something that I'd never watched, and I was expecting it to be an absolute classic. Then I felt a kind of bit let down at the end about it. There was various good points, but I was maybe I was just expecting, my expectations were a bit too high going into it. I'll see what Daniel thinks about it now.
I think what you've said is kind of what I expected. This is one of those that, for me, I like this because of the nostalgia of watching this as a kid, and it was like, this was a big, this and Nightmare on Elm Street and similar movies at the time got me into horror movies. So when I watch this back, I'm sort of, you look at it back at it with that, it's a weird movie to say this about. I'm looking back on Halloween with the joy of a child, but that's it. But no, so I do sort of get the shortcomings of it, but like Hunter said, it's 40 years old. You've got to understand what it did on such a small budget. I think this sort of sets the standard for, like Hunter said, like this has been, every single movie since this is trying to do something similar to this. Like we just saw with The Strangers, it's sort of taking the exact same techniques for this movie. And I think this is why this is so highly regarded. It's introduced so many of those techniques and that are still used now in almost every single horror film. But yeah, no, it's good. It's a basic story, but everybody knows it. And I think the simplicity of it is why this is so successful. I mean, you can speak to anybody worldwide. They know who Michael Myers is. They know that he was going back to, you know that he murdered his sister. And like even in the latest one, like I've not watched it yet, but apparently people move into his old house. Well, you know that you're going to get killed if you move into Michael Myers' house. That's just the fucking end of it. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's a testament to how good this is that it's lasted for 40 years and people are still interested in sequels and new add-ons all the time. Obviously, there's bits in this that don't quite add up. I don't want to quite jump in your trivia, but in case you might have this one, Hunter, but you probably noticed that this looks like the height of summer when they filmed this. Like the trees are.
Yes, I've actually got that there. So it's filmed in the spring, and the on that as well was, you noticed that basically, like there's that one scene where the boy falls over when he's got the pumpkin in his hand and he gets tipped up at the school, and they also allude to making jack-o'-lanterns several other times throughout the film, but you never actually see them. And it's because it was to do with the time of year it was filmed, they couldn't source pumpkins, so I think that one pumpkin must have been the only one they had.
Like, they scatter leaves everywhere, so it's like, it's clearly there's no leaves falling off the trees, but there's dead leaves in every single scene all over the ground. But I think what they did in the budget, obviously, I'm going to jump in again because this is one of my favourite bits of movie trivia, Hunter, so hopefully you've got more. But do you know who the mask is of? Like what the mask is?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Yeah.
What does it want?
Bungie won't know who William Shatner is.
Share with the masses and educate Daniel.
Yeah, it's a William Shatner mask is what they used for this, which I thought was quite interesting. It always comes up in pub quizzes, that's the classic pub quiz question. But I've got a feeling that Sean's going to shite on this a wee bit, so I want to hear what he's going to say.
I'm not going to shite on it.
That much.
I've seen it as like, obviously, like it is the benchmark for horror films in it, and the kind of wide shots that we spoke about in The Strangers, this basically came for Halloween. It's just, I'm just kind of seen it that many times that it's just. I think you watch this every year. Although me and Laurie did get the chance to go to the pictures to see it. They were doing I don't know if it was a new Halloween out, I can't remember the reason, or if it was an anniversary of, it might have been that, might have been back in 2018 or something. Anyway, but it was really good watching it at the cinema. But it's probably the most watched horror film for me, though that I've seen. She likes to watch it every Halloween and stuff like that. She absolutely loves it, but that's, again, it's just kind of when it came up that we were watching it, I was a bit kind of disappointed because I would have rather have kind of watched something that I'd maybe not seen before. And again, this is probably one of the films that I've seen that many times, certainly horror-wise, but it is good. It builds it with there and stuff like that. There's not much violence in it, which is weird for a horror film, but it is just all about, you know what I mean, the kind of wide shots and Mike Myers and the music as well really builds everything up, so you don't really need that much violence in it, but that's just probably as much shit on it as I can. It's just saying that a bit tired of watching it every year. Might start watching like just the next ones, like Halloween 2 and 3 and all that.
Well, if you want to go through the actual franchise itself, the one that came out on the 15th of October this year was the 12th movie of Halloween. And they have got one coming next October called Halloween Ends, which hopefully will be the last one that they keep making of this, because that'll be 13 movies based off of Mike Myers.
The way that it works is you've got the first one, the second one, and then you've got last year's new one, this year's one, and then next year's one. That's meant to be the actual canon story that you follow. So there you go. So you don't have to watch all fucking 13.
There's some I've not even heard that, like, I knew I was Halloween 1, Halloween 2, then Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
Don't watch that. It's nothing to do with... Mike Myers isn't even in it. It's just like a completely different movie about witches.
And then you've got Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Like, then H2O kicks in, which is like the most memorable one for me, because I'd have been 11 when that came out, so it'd have been quite cool to see.
So bad.
It's never ending. Like, they could make 100 of these films because it's literally just overalls and a mask. Like, aging doesn't really matter. You can continue it in any time setting. It can, do you know what I mean? So they'll probably keep this going for another couple of years anyway.
One thing I would quite like to say is, has anyone watched the remakes, the Rob Zombie remakes?
No, well, Chris has just put in the chat, watch the one with Busta Rhymes. What one's that?
Yeah, the remakes. No, wait, I don't know which one that is. Is that no H2O Busta Rhymes is in?
Is that the one? Halloween Resurrection, out in 2002.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So the remakes made by Rob Zombie, like, Michael Myers was like a 7-foot giant in it, like Kane for the wrestling. It's quite cool. It's actually quite a good movie.
I don't know if I've seen it. I can't. It's all just kind of merges into one sometimes for me, Halloween stuff.
It gives you a lot more background to like him in the mental hospital and like how he became so much of like a murderous psycho, and it leans more towards that he got made a psycho by being in the mental hospital rather than just being evil. If you know what I mean?
Well, Chris says that Resurrection is basically just a bad comedy film, so we'll have to give that one a watch. I was just saying that, Daniel, the one that you're saying with him being a lot bigger is he's actually played by Tyler Mane.
Yeah, it's been the wrestling now.
He's wrestling Tyler Mane. He's also an X-Men and Troy. He's just the big guy. That's how Tyler Mane gets known by. Hunter, do you have any more trivia on this movie? Has everyone had their pitch on Halloween?
Yes, I do have some. So Jamie Lee Curtis was obviously hired for the film by John Carpenter, and that was a nod to Alfred Hitchcock because Jamie Lee Curtis's mum was hired for the film Psycho.
Oh.
Is she the main woman in Psycho?
I think so, Janet Leigh.
Wow.
And the budget for this film was $300,000 in 1978. It made $47 million at the box office back then, which in 2008, which is when this fact was lifted from, would have equated to $150 million, which is no bad in inflation for that. Obviously, I think how much it's probably made since then. And in 2008 as well, I think it was voted the 5th scariest film of all time by Entertainment Weekly.
Wow.
I can't think of much more that would be above it, possibly. Obviously, The Exorcist and
Psycho
and The Shining, possibly.
Oh, The Shining. I love The Shining. Cool. Well, guys, that then, I think we've wrapped up Halloween pretty quickly there. Halloween has just literally been last night as well. So a good way for us to come to the end of the stream. But let's get our scores for this. See where this is in went on the leaderboard. Potentially something that might go a little bit higher than Nightmare on Elm Street. But we'll come to you first, Hunter.
Right. I think just for the shock factor, again, I basically watched all 3 of these yesterday, and I think because the Descent shocked me that bit more, that I've literally scored that slightly higher, so it's a 3.5 for Halloween for me.
A 3.5, and Daniel, of course, I did miss out Instagram, totally forgot. Please jump in. Tell me what Insta said about this.
This got obviously the most votes. It's obviously the most well known. A couple of folk gave this pretty low scores. I think a lot of this will depend on what age you were when you first watched it, but I got a 3.5 overall, so the highest scoring of the 3 movies on Instagram.
3.5, and just continue on with your score for Halloween, please.
Yeah, I've probably enjoyed watching The Descent more, but because I've seen Halloween so many times. But for the appreciation of what it is and what it means to cinema more, I'm giving it a 4 as well.
A 4 for that. And Burnsy?
I'm just going to go the slightly higher than Descent. I think my review kind of made it probably sound a bit worse than what it was, but it does. You need to appreciate how old it is and obviously how much other films have taken from it. So I'm going to give it a 2.75.
A 2.75. Sean?
My score's been much the kind of same all night. I'm going to go with a 3 for this as well.
A 3. Well, guys, I'm going to come in and score at my highest of the today. Again, based on how I feel and how my experience was throughout it, I'll give it a 4.5. Thought this was class. I would watch this again without it being Halloween because I'm a badass. What's the overall score for this then, Burnsy?
So that's overall a 3.55.
A 3.55, which then doesn't overtake Nightmare on Elm Street, but it does, however, bring it up to 26 on our leaderboard, just below Moneyball and just above Birdman/Milk.
We should strip out all the horror movies and stick them up on Instagram with all our scores as well this week. So you have top 10 in there now, eh?
We've got
we can definitely spark some debate with some of the scores on there, I think.
Are we putting Dark Crimes in the horror section?
No, we should put Capone in the horror section.
We should put Dark Crimes and Zulu Dawn in there just because it was horrible as the experience.
Dark Crimes doesn't deserve a genre. Like, it's just shite.
I think, guys, we should have like an anniversary of when we watched Dark Crimes, because that'll be coming up a year, not too long from it. We should watch it again with fresh eyes, see what the thoughts are.
I'd like to put myself through it.
No, I'd have my fresh eyes gouged out before the end of the film.
Oh dear. Well, guys, as we just alluded there, it is coming up to a 1-year anniversary of this. And we are unfortunately not going to be streaming next Monday, which will be Monday the 8th. We are going to move that stream from Monday the 8th to Wednesday the 10th. Wednesday the 10th will be essentially our 1-year anniversary. So it'll be a good catch up, a good time to talk about what we've done throughout the last year. And we are going to be watching, finally, he did get selected. We are going to have Daniel's picks when it comes to the movies for next week. Daniel, remind us, you let us know what were the movies that were selected?
So yeah, from the 16 movies that I chose, it was probably the closest voting we've ever had, and the most exciting voting we've probably ever had, because almost every round seemed to be going down to 1 or 2 votes for every choice until we got to the final. So I was quite shocked by what ended up winning out of all the choices, but we've got Django Unchained, so we've nearly completed Tarantino now. And
Thank God.
but I think this one's the most unique out of all of these movies, so I'm interested to see what people think. I think both of these films might split the group. And then District 9, which I think is one of the most unique movies ever made. So interested to see what people think about that.
And there we go. So that'll be the movies getting reviewed on Wednesday the 10th. For Daniel to finally get his picks on our 1-year anniversary. So that does bring us towards the end of the stream. So just to recap, we have watched Halloween, which came in at a 3.55. The Descent, that came in at a 3.1. And I've totally forgot last movie. There's Strangers, that came in at a 3.35. Chris has put Yas more feet. So we're getting more feet out of Django, are we?
I don't remember many feet scenes in Django, but there probably is.
Oh, I know. Tarantino equals guaranteed feet.
Guaranteed feet. Ugh. Sean's in heaven. So we typically would spin a wheel here to work out what's going to be the category as we start our voting ongoing. We had a little discussion pre-stream to what we're going to do, and I think we're going to do a little bit of a best of the rest that is missed out throughout the year. Put them into a 16, and then put them out there to voting, because we're choking to get True Romance on there, boys. True Romance is something that's going to be on that list 15 times.
Well, it's not on any of the streaming anymore, but I'll pay for it if it wins.
It's but there's a few films out there that have been so close to getting there but never quite made it. So watch out on our Instagram. The socials are always, as always, just below on the screen at the moment. The podcast as well. Please make sure you guys have a listen on our podcast. We are still on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. Thanks to the 47 people that downloaded our podcast last week, which is our best week yet since we've been doing them. That'll be up again for this week's episode in the next day or two. But that is it, guys. Anything else you want to add before we finish up today's stream?
No, not for me.
No, well, Sean, finally horror weeks are over and done with. We can move on to something a little bit different. And hopefully we won't get as much horror coming for the next couple of weeks, will we?
I'm glad it's done. I'm glad it's done. No more horror films for at least a year.
Until the next time when we fill the best of the rest.
Just like when we're stuck watching Hallmark Christmas movies, you'll be praying for Halloween movies to be back again.
When we've got Miracle on 34th Street followed by Elf. Oh. Anyway, guys, that is bringing us towards the end of the stream. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good night.
Cheers.